So welcome to the panelists. My name is Mark Giles. I present AMG World, and I'll be the host for today's session. So we also have the following panelists. We have Celia Gasolin, Sheetal Kamat, and Jonas Kolesa. So it goes without saying, very excited to have the panelists here today, and I'm sure it'll be a very insightful and interesting discussion about accelerating lab digitalization, real-time mobile documentation for consumer goods. So let's get going. Let's get started with the discussion. So just to reiterate and maybe expand a little bit on the focus of today's discussion, as mentioned, we're exploring the topic of accelerating lab digitalization. So what that means is the panelists will explore some of the barriers in R&D labs, as well as how to overcome them, and also focus on AI-boosted mobile devices. We'll look at the best way to identify suitable use cases and also strategies to implement. So I'd just like to formally introduce our moderator for today's discussion. We have Celia Gasolin, who is Marketing Communication Manager for LabTwin. So Celia, perhaps maybe you could start by providing a quick overview, who you are, what your current role is, and why you're passionate about this topic.
Thank you, Mark. So good day, everyone. Indeed, I'm Celia Gasolin. I'm leading the marketing effort at LabTwin, where we are developing a digital lab assistant for scientists. And prior to join LabTwin, I was actually a postdoctorate in neurobiology at EPFL in Switzerland, where I participated to the rollout of our own new ELN and LIMS, and that made me discover the exciting world of lab and digitization and lab informatics. And so today we will discuss the topic of the opportunity for real-time mobile documentation for consumer goods, and I will let our two panelists introduce themselves. So maybe, Jonas, you want to start it off?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, my name is Jonas Kolesa. I'm the head of engineering for LabTwin, and my role basically is to manage the software development teams, the integrations, and the security of our product.
Thank you, Jonas. Sheetal?
Hello, everyone. This is Sheetal. I'm a microbiologist by profession and have worked in pharmaceutical and FMCG sections, FMCG sectors in both lab setups as well as the manufacturing setup. So I'll be kind of representing all of you, and I'll be asking and trying to get the answers of the questions that all of us have in our minds when we talk about digitalization and AI. So looking forward to have a discussion. Yeah.
Thank you, Sheetal. So maybe the best is to start with brief introductions about what we mean by real-time mobile documentation. So we mean that by developing a digital lab assistant designed for the lab, we are providing scientists with an interface that is designed for the scientists' needs and to support their activity in the lab when they're doing the experiment and need to document what they're doing. So we believe that the ideal interface has to be hands-free, powered by voice, for example, and also, most importantly, can understand science and scientific workflows. Usually when we're talking about voice assistant, the first concerns that are raised are, does it really work? Can you understand me and my science, especially because a lot of people have also experience with Alexa or Siri, which is maybe not ideal tool to understand the complex scientific terms. So just to show what is possible, at LabTwin we made a test actually. We run several sentences through our models composed with a very specific science term, and then the same sentences with the classic assistant, Google Assistant or Amazon Alexa. And then we can see and showcase that when we train the model very specifically for science and scientific terms, we can reach an accuracy of 95%, which is way superior to what the commercial classic assistant can provide, which is more of this order of 78 or 73%. So this is why it's actually possible to use voice in the lab and to be understood as a scientist. So digital lab assistant can understand the scientist. That's a very good start, meaning that we can capture voice notes. What else can it does? digital assistants do also to capture the visual data. So for example, a picture of your samples, a reagent, an instrument settings. You can scan barcodes or also read out information with optical character recognition, which is very convenient for registration of an instrument, for example, or an equipment. We can fill up tables also by voice, and then whenever you're measuring something, for example, then the values are going inside the tables at the right place, and you can get walked through your data capture. A digital assistant can also walk you through your protocol and step by step, and then triggers for some data capture or setting up a timer, for example, that helps you through your process. And you can also access data that can be inventory information, where is my reagent stored, or safety information, for example, do I need glove for manipulating this reagent, or how do I discard this, or also instrument status, for example. So it's all the scope that digital lab assistants can do at a first glance. And it's always easier to imagine it in the lab. So here I can show you how this would look like during an experiment. I took the example of a classic sample preparation because I think it can resonate with most of you. And so the first step usually is to record the materials that can be used, the instruments, the reagent. So this can be done in several ways. Usually it's taken on paper still in most labs, but sometimes it can be also typed or selected in the ELN. Here with a digital lab assistant, for example, you will just have to scan the different component of your experiment, or record by voice if you prefer, as a voice note, and then save time by just scanning or voicing when you're walking around and registering your material. Then the second step is you will, for example, start by weighing your samples. This can be done in two different ways. You can, for example, scan each sample, putting in the connected balances, and capture the weight from the balance directly in a table that it comes organized in a table. Or if you don't have the connected balance, you can simply voice each results one by one, and they also get captured directly in your table. If at any time you have to make an observation or there's something happening that you need to document, you can just pick up and record this as a note, or specific samples that look different, for example. And all this information, of course, gets recorded with the username, the timestamp, or any other metadata that you wish to be recorded at this time. Then if you need to dilute the samples, which is a very classic operation that one can do during sample preparation, the good thing with having a digital lab assistant is that you get your calculation done automatically. So you don't have to use a calculator or a computer. It just directly processes the information that you get in, like the weight, and then spit back out the amount of reagent you need to dilute the sample. So that makes your workflow very seamless. And then all this data that you captured is directly digitalized and can be transferred at the end of the day to any repository of your choice, your ELN, your LIMS, your LES, whatever makes sense for you in your organization. So this is how we can save time, get all the data digitally recorded in real time in an hands-free way, and most importantly, get it all saved in a structured manner in your ELN or LIMS at the end of the day. So enough of me talking. Now we will hear what the panelists have to say about it. So I wanted to start with Sheetal, maybe, and your experience as a scientist. Which data do you collect from your lab, and which tools are you using right now for this?
Okay. I think we are all surrounded with data. So everything that we do, there is a lot of data that we generate. So if I talk about say a manufacturing setup, there's a lot of releases that we need to do. So a lot of QC data that is generated. And when we say QC, it means all different kind of testings, analytical testings, microbiological testings, everything it includes. And when you talk about an R&D setup, we have data that is generated starting from the early development stage, wherein we do a bunch of different testings. And when it goes, like when you're finalizing something and it is going to the stability studies, stability involves huge amount of data, because as the purpose is that you understand the shelf life of the product out of it. So that critically involves a lot of data, where if it is not managed properly, first of all, it might not serve the purpose of the uh, for which you have conducted the study. And the other thing is, it might also impact your regulatory or compliance requirements. So all these, so we have like data generated at each step of the QC as well as the R&D process.
And so normally, how do you capture the data? Do you use paper? Do you use computers? Do you have specific softwares?
Yeah, so right now it's like an hybrid one. So if I look at the industry in general, I think it's hybrid. There's nothing like one entirely digital or entirely manual. And there are different applications that are used for like different types of data. So when you talk about like testings, etc., we primarily use LIMS systems, ELN systems. And when we talk about the lab management systems or operational things, there are different cloud-based softwares that are available. And depending upon the organization's requirement, functional requirement, there are different ones that we use.
When you mean cloud-based systems, it's to record which type of data? Also the data that you of the experiment in the lab, or more operational data?
It's an experimental data. So to give you an example, consider you're working in a controlled environment or a clean room. You need to monitor the temperature, RH on a very regular and frequent basis. So there are some cloud-based systems which allow you to do that 24/7 automatically. So you can access it real time from anywhere.
Okay, makes sense. Thanks. So, I mean, you said you're using also LIMS, ELN. I think at LabTwin also a lot of our customers are actually using ELNs and LIMS on top of paper. It's, as you said, a hybrid situation. And so, Jonas, maybe you can tell us a bit more about why the combination with LabTwin makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you showed it a little bit in the slide before, and I think what you said, Sheetal, around we are surrounded by data. Like both of this kind of went into the original design of LabTwin, where we kind of saw the data is very ubiquitous. It is just not easy to access it. So what we are trying to solve is basically allowing scientists, while they are doing the experiment or while they might not be at a point where they would traditionally be able to with a computer access the SaaS solution or maybe the website, to still be able to access the data, to access the guidance. And for this, of course, we integrate with ELN and LIMS systems to either pull information like inventory information, like you said, for the shelf life of a product, SOPs when it comes to the execution instructions or protocols, or just record results or observations. So our goal is basically to really give scientists an easy way to use the existing data that is all around them, and to use all of these points of data that are already there, but to bring them closer to the bench or to bring them closer to their fingertips. And for this, it's kind of important that we always look at what are the frictions that people might have with accessing certain systems, and then look at what is a good way to make this easier, right? Otherwise, there would be no point of us being in the labs. But we see that there's a lot of frictions just when it comes to, for example, voice. Like sometimes you cannot use your hands, so voice is way easier, or just is an enabler that even allows you to record or access information. Same goes for photos. Like sometimes it's way easier to take a photo. I think we saw like a small image of this in LabTwin, where you would basically photograph a material, and we would then automatically detect it and put it into the database if there's maybe no barcoding available. If there's a barcode, we can also read this. So for us, it's really the focus on usability and UX. But also at the second paradigm that we're using is really to integrate with the existing infrastructure. And our goal is not to master data. Our goal is to enrich, retrieve, and then push the data back to the existing systems all around them, but also unify access to them a little bit. Because often what we have seen, at least in pharma and chemical companies, there's a lot of different systems, and just switching between them for the different purposes can be quite a hassle. And having one solution that basically makes this easier for us is a big goal to basically to achieve or bring this to the users basically.
Thank you. Yeah, indeed. That's one part of the lab digitization is finding the right interface and what makes sense at which part of the full scientific process. So maybe Sheetal, you can explain. You're a bit leading also a part of the lab digitization at your company. And so can you share a bit more about what are the current business goals or the current trends? What are you trying to achieve with this?
Yeah, so I think in general, if I speak about digitalization, I think Jonas has captured it bang on. I mean, the data is everywhere, and how you make that data meaningful is what the industry is looking up to. Because you see the industries, whether it is pharma, whether it is FMCG or anything, there is a huge amount of data that companies has, especially the ones who are like established already. There are branded companies, they have a lot of data already. So how we can use it and make the things faster, not relying on, just on the bench work, and instead getting the benefit out of the data that is already generated. I think that is the key purpose that is going to serve to the industry immediately, because there's a lot of, I'm sure there's, the moment you are talking about the voice, using voice, etc., that really excites me. If I put myself as an analyst, that really excites me because that reduces a lot of my work, right? And that does help in a different ways. Maybe we can will come across as we speak more on that. But to answer your question, I think making data meaningful is the key goal that any organization would be look up to when it will come to digitalization. And when I say, so if I want to explain that a little bit more, Jonas captured a few things like, making it more accessible. The data should be, if once it is accessible, it should be traceable. If it is traceable, then you can, relate different data and understand what is the trend. How can we integrate the learnings that we have got from one study and use it to the other without, repeating the testings again and again, which impacts the cost as well as efforts, time of development, everything. And in the fast-paced environment that we are now, the industry is now asking for agility in everything. So this kind of a data trending, etc., is going to help a lot. Analytics, we talk about data analytics. So if there is no digitization, there is no point in talking about analytics. So I think everything is related, and as a goal, again, I would say making the data more meaningful and usable, more usable and trendable is what I would say.
Thanks. So, I mean, one part of the challenge is to make the data usable, as you said, and aggregate it also to be able to analyze it on a bigger scope, is to standardize it, right? I mean, I hear a lot of people also making a lot of effort into data standardization. So I was wondering if also it's something that you're focusing on.
Yeah. I think I missed on that possibly because there's if one of the aspect when you want to make things more effective is collaboration, and when you want to collaborate, if the things are uniform across, it makes more sense. If it's like distributed and everything is different, your first effort would go again. So at one front, you are looking at digitization as a solution for making things faster and effective. And on the other front, you are complexing it by having different templates. And I think if you have a solution that gives you a common platform as well as a uniform kind of a template or structure where everybody, whosoever uses it, it is in a unified format. And yeah, that's very critical.
Thanks. Makes a lot of sense. So, Jonas, when we talk about digital lab assistants, like something very individual and personal, which on one part can be great because then it feels like I can really tailor it to my need. But then, is it helping also the bigger goal of standardizing and homogeneizing the good practices and the data capture?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a good question because the goal of an assistant, as you said, is to be personal, but the goal on the other side of an assistant is to hook into the standard templates at the same time. And that is basically the interfacing function that we always have to do well. If we just go super personal and record everything very freeform, it might be good as something that helps the scientists while they do their job, but it doesn't have the organization data. So our goal is really to basically take standard templates, allow scientists to interact with these templates as freeform as possible so they can frictionlessly create data, but then in the end, move everything back into a format that kind of makes sense for the organization. And one trend that we're seeing that is currently coming up is of course, around this generative AI and large language models, which really helps to change the way we can bridge these gaps, right? It makes it way easier for us to relate information that in the past would have been very, very hard to relate. And that kind of opens up completely new dimensions where a lab assistant can make this connection while being hyper individualized, which is super, super interesting for us. And we already see from early user feedback that is something that people are really looking for, because they want to have this individual touch. They want to have this very contextual help. But at the same time, the organization is, of course, interested to collect this data. Again, Sheetal, what you said, to basically allow analytics of the data, right? So, and it's actually quite interesting because especially in an R&D setting, sometimes the need might not appear obvious to every scientist, like how much data can be captured that can be useful. For the organization it is. So that's where like having something that makes it as easy as possible to record everything, enrich it as much as possible is super valuable, because then the incentives kind of are aligned quite well. Otherwise, you end up with a structure where it says like, oh, when you run this procedure, please note down all of these 100 things. If you don't have time, you will, or at least in our experience, people will rarely do it. But if this is something that happens automatically, that is, of course, good. And an assistant has the advantage that in our case, we are very close to the users. So we have a lot of context. We know what they're currently working on, where they are, what's around them. And that enables us to just take fragments of data and enrich them with a lot of additional information and basically increase the quality and the quantity that we are capturing by a lot. And we actually take quite some time to analyze the data that we're capturing and see what the quality of it is and what the usefulness of it is for the organization data. And we don't just randomly collect everything. We really focus on the things that make sense for the organization. I know it's a little meta, this conversation that we're having here, but it's really the thing. I think what you captured quite well in the question, Celia, in terms of like, we want to be individual, but we also at the same time want to capture data that afterwards is useful.
Yeah, exactly. That's what is missing usually, right? Is that this level of standardization is what a lot of people put an effort into, but the personalization, usually there's not really a way to do it. And we can try to bridge this lack of individuality that is more and more modern with providing a digital lab assistant. However, a lot of people are putting the effort right now into developing templates within their ELN and LIMS, and they feel like they don't want to recreate the same thing into another devices. So how would that be with a digital lab assistant? Can it be merged or called, or how would that work?
Yeah, we spent quite a bit of time on this, because the question a little bit is like, are we talking about a lab that is just doing this paper to glass kind of move, where everything is not really made for in a digital form or a digitized form? In this case, we actually built quite a bit of tooling to make sure that this process can be as easy as possible for the organizations to basically say, I have an existing template, maybe it's on paper, it's mostly a Word file, but I want to have it as a step-by-step protocol. So we basically built quite a bit of tooling around this to get to this protocol. And we also do it in a way where this is later useful for other third-party software also. So our goal is basically to help organizations to do this lift and shift, coming from a Word doc to then going to a structured executable protocol. It doesn't necessarily have to be in LabTwin in this case, but we know that the tooling that is necessary in the beginning is really required, because when we talk to these organizations, often there's this fear to say like, we cannot go there because we might not be ready with our current setup. And we have seen that by introducing help to make this easier, it's actually quite important. So that's why we have focused on this for quite a bit over the last year to make this transition as easy as possible.
Thanks. Okay, so Sheetal, have you ever considered actually distributing digital lab assistant to scientists in your lab? Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, we are not directly in the lab, but yes, to the closer to the lab section, like a pilot plant setup, wherein a lot of devices, like if I want to give an example, something like a RealWare, where you just can see everything on a real-time basis, and virtually everything is possible. So something like a situation like a COVID, and the technologies like this are very, very helpful to keep the business running. And I think a few things that Jonas said, I would agree to that customization, I think, is very, very important. It's very important. Every function or every company or a setup will have a different requirement, and if the digital solution is not customized as per the requirement, it will create more chaos than helping it out. And when we talk about, so he mentioned also that when we try to put the system in, change the systems from manual or to a hybrid one, or from hybrid to a complete digital one, there's a lot of make and ship that needs to happen. You need to train the people should get used to the systems. There's a lot of hesitancy when you're moving from one system to the other. You need to make them comfortable that this works the same way as it used to be before. It is as simpler as the previous system. It is just that people used to get familiarized with it. Once they get familiarized, then they start promoting the system to others as well. We are using this and this is working really well. But these are the same people who will be kind of at the first would say that this is very bad, and we are wasting a lot of time, it's taking too much of time, it's too slower. So I think it depends on how we are implementing any initiative, and how well it was planned and discussed. So I think it requires a lot of collaboration between the domain expert and the technical experts who is providing these solutions. If there is a very good understanding of what is the need, and we are catering to the need, I think all the obstacles that it comes across can be addressed. So to answer to your question, there had been many digital solutions that we had used. At least I had used during my career, at least.
Thanks. Yeah, the usability is always a big challenge, and of course, change management is what go in pair with this. The better is your usability, the less change management you need to do, or the poorer your usability is, the more change management. But there's in any case a bit change management. I think this is the challenge of our era. Moving to digital, it's requiring a lot of change management, and this is a harmless topic, of course. I know that one concern that a lot of people also have regarding mobile is about the data security. And I think this is something that Jonas is expert in and can discuss. Why should we or should we not be concerned about this regarding using mobile in the scientific and lab context?
maybe before Jonas answers, I would thank you, Gaslin, for asking that question, because the moment he spoke about voice recording and everything, that does sound exciting, but it is, and he mentioned about generative AI, very exciting, but it leads to a lot of questions. What about the security, confidentiality? Because in a setup like an R&D, there is a lot of proprietary information, etc., that is there, and how do we really take care of that part? I am curious what Jonas has to answer for that.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, this is kind of my favorite kind of discussion. Me personally, I have worked in regulated industries for the last 20 years, like in finance and insurance, industry, like manufacturing, and now pharma. And this is always like a super valid concern, right? So like, how do we make sure that whatever we do is kept safe? Does it have to be on premise? How do I secure that only I can access certain things? What's the traceability? So when we built LabTwin, that went into the design from day one, basically. So we follow 4 different paradigms. 2 of them are super important here. One is the secure by default. The other one is the zero trust. So every system that is set up, like it doesn't matter if we use it for testing or it is like an early production prototype, like everything has to be secured to an extent where it can withstand the pressure of the internet, basically. Of course, there's quite a bit of automation going on these days that is really helping us in from the IT space, because these days it's very easy to constantly monitor your systems for being up to date, what kind of threats you are exposed to. It's kind of easy to add quite a bit of firewalls for everything. But that is, of course, not enough, right? So like we are a SaaS solution, so technically everything is, of course, housed in the internet and secured there. But because everybody has kind of the same questions around how do we do or deal with best practices when it comes to security and privacy, we have certified our company with the ISO 27001 and 27017 certifications after a year, because we saw that there's so many questions coming in. And we didn't want to explain basically how we do things, because we saw the questions are super valid. But it's very hard also for companies to kind of assess, like, do they do everything right on their end, basically? And having these certifications really helps, especially since we can now show that not only we did like the initial audit, but did 2 recertifications already. So this is where people really look into how well our systems work and our control mechanisms are. But because we don't want to stop there, we are currently in the process of also doing a SOC 2 certification, which is another IT security one that is a little more famous in the North American continent. But security is really something that is at the core of what we do. It sometimes makes things a little slower, but we will always make time for this. And the roles when it comes to security and compliance were one of the first ones that we have created in LabTwin, like way earlier than others, because we know that is super important. When you just said, Sheetal, that it is actually a question about voice and what's happening with these clients, like we built a system that basically everything is stored and secured in one central place in the cloud. The clients are comparably dumb. And since this question actually comes up quite a lot with customers, like we also do threat modeling together with customers to kind of see, okay, like what are the potential scenarios with the mobile clients, for example. And basically resulting out of these, we have even hardened them more already when it comes to discarding information that is no longer needed, only caching the really necessary things. And when it comes to voice, also only capturing exactly what the scientists want us to capture and nothing else. And at the same time, taking quite a bit of extra functionality that is not present in, for example, Alexa or Siri, where people can control how these voice sessions work, when they automatically disconnect or turn off. So there's quite a bit of control that you can take to make sure that everybody feels in full control of how the data basically goes into LabTwin. And of course, we have very transparent contracts around what we do with the data and how it works. as it should be, I want to say, especially when you live in Europe with your company. But I think we're actually kind of at the forefront when we try to live it as close to the law as possible, basically.
Chita, did it answer any question you had about the data security or encryption?
Yeah. Europe, Jonas mentioned Europe, and that immediately gives me one word: data integrity. There's a lot of thing that Europe asks for, and one of the thing that is common amongst all the regulatories, and there's a lot of focus nowadays, is data integrity and how the data is stored, how it is secured, who can access it, is there any scope of data breaching, and every company has their own security policies, how this will get integrate into it. So I think Jonas kind of answered it, but I think it's the more we use it, or more possibly we explore it, we might be able to get more answers of it. But that definitely is a question. AI, generative AI, and now we are talking about an extended reality, which kind of bridging the physical and the digital world. So all these questions, I think, are bound to happen.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's also very interesting at LabTwin, because often we are at this frontiers where something new comes in and we all together have to figure out like what is a good way to deal with this technology in a safe way, right? So especially when you sign now generative AI, we are one of the first companies that actually introduces this to our product. And we are super happy to work with the companies that are our customers to kind of see, okay, what are the strong needs that they have, and then figure out like what are ways that they can deploy this technology safely, which in a way is really helping everybody in the end, right? So like once we have like the third customer asking the same questions, at some point we have a very good standard that then can be applied to everyone. And it was kind of the same, to be honest, when we introduced the cloud, because actually quite a few customers did their first steps into SaaS or cloud with us together. And we were super happy to basically together with them figure out like what are the rules and requirements that they have, and how should like a SaaS product comply here. And I would expect the same for these generative AI or more complex generative AI tasks. But even now already we are thinking about different classes or how this can be deployed. Like there are things that are less questionable or where less threat modeling has to be done, and there are cases where there's definitely more. And we always try to do it as quickly as possible in a context that is first and foremost safe and complies with all the regulatory requirements that they are.
Thanks. So something that we didn't dive into yet is it's more the use cases for then mobile in the lab. So Shital, you talked a bit about this already with also the smart glasses during COVID. And do you have any other use cases that you see that would be very benefiting from having then a mobile technology in the lab?
Yeah, I think I mentioned about the real-time monitoring devices. Then we have real-time testing devices, online monitorings, wherein you don't really, the analyst doesn't have to really go and do the testings by themselves, but there are online monitors on the system, which will kind of do the testing on the real time. And at the same time, they are going to send the data, the output or the result of it on a cloud-based system or on a software, whatever is the interface of it. And that really helps a lot. I mean, for something like a manufacturing setup that runs 24/7, and a person or an individual cannot be like work for that much long, and if anything goes wrong, the entire manufacturing batch is gone for a toss. So in such a case, I think this kind of technologies are helping out. There are many cases. In this is the one example. The other one would be some cloud-based systems that we are using, wherein you just have to install the devices on the equipments. The equipment captures data on a regular interval and it sends it to the cloud-based interface. anybody in the lab can just have to go and log in from any of the devices. It is not that you just have to use your laptop or a desktop. You can access it via your mobile, and the entire data is available to on tip of your fingers at any time. And it also allows you to analyze the data that is generated over a period of time. You can trend it, you can understand what is, if there are any excursions, how we can leverage the data. If there is if you're seeing a continuous pattern, how we can use it and make some solutions around it. So all that becomes easy on the tip of fingers. So yeah.
Makes sense. And so there's one, let's say, category of person that usually we think about, the scientist, of course, but there's also everybody involved into the lab supports. Do you also see there some use cases for that?
Yeah, so lab support, I think something like a generative AI or a voice-based system is very, very useful, because the people who are working on shop floors or in help support, lab support functions like housekeeping, etc., they are not very tech savvy, or they are not really very much, like, they have a limited qualification. So it becomes really difficult to introduce them to a format like a ELN or LabNet, and the only solution that remains is your manual paperwork, and that leads to a lot of errors. And when we are concerned about data integrity, that puts forth a big question mark. So if there is a user-friendly device like a voice system, then it's very easy. You just have to train them how to use the device, and you are rest assured that whatever you are getting is real time, and it is like free of errors and complying to the regulations. And while talking, I think also there are other aspects as well, like somebody like me who is a microbiology, we work with biological agents, and so it happens that when we are working, since we are handling hazardous agents, we can't really use the hands, and there's a lot of information that we need to either remember, or remove your entire PPs, etc., go to the desktop or your laptop, and then do the entries again, for new PPs, again do the entries. So this storing information, keeping it in your mind, and then it can lead to data loss, lot of errors. And if we have a device like this, as you're working, you just have to speak it up, or if it is attached to something like a camera, then you're also recording what you're doing on a real-time basis. So if anything has gone wrong, so when we do our root cause analysis for any failures, etc., we really have to interview the analyst and ask them questions. What has gone wrong? What was there anything that has gone wrong from the analyst point of view, from the technical point of view? And what you have to believe what the analyst is saying. That analyst might have forgotten many things. And if you have a device like this, basically what you need to do is just plug in to whatever interface it is and see what has happened. And even analysts can recollect what would have gone wrong then. So I think there are a lot of applications when we are talking about lab setups and these kind of devices or applications like um, voice and generative AI and machine learning, all those stuffs.
Thanks. I think it was a very good overview of everything that is needed in real time in the lab, and when sometimes it's actually not possible. And something also that we got often asked for is, because we're there to witness in real time whatever the scientists are doing in the lab, one thing that also is very nice to be able to track is the consumption of reagent and supporting the inventory management. So maybe Jonas, you can speak a bit about this, of like how can a mobile then support this?
I think when it comes to reagents or materials, that is an excellent use case for data retrieval because technically, this is a thing where you need just a tiny bit of information, but you don't want to access like a system that is very complex, maybe that has this info. And if you look at traditional solutions, like sometimes it takes quite a few clicks and a lot of brain power to kind of figure out the number that you would be needing when in reality we just want to ask like, okay, like what's the shelf life of this, or where is X kind of in a question, or just say like reduce the amount here. Since we are basically an open API system, it is not that hard for us to connect to a new system and allow maybe even a custom connector here to say like, oh, I have an inventory solution, maybe it's even custom made, and I want to ask these 3-4 specific questions that are linked to materials. And since materials are part of SOPs or protocols, it's actually not that hard to even automate this further to kind of say, okay, like in this protocol, I have these 5 materials, I can automatically check where they are, and I can allow questions about them without having the need to specify the SKU or the barcode or something more complex that you might have to read off like another system or like a very complex label. And we've seen that this is one of the use cases that really makes AI shine, or like a digital assistant shine, because it is very simple and it reduces the time needed for the process of retrieving information super easy. And at the same time, it's also something that can be done more or less automatically. Like some of the information can be retrieved without you even asking, because of course you're interested in the shelf life, but you can easily flag it to someone saying like, actually this compound here might not be something that you want to be using. And that is like something that we consider some level of intelligence. But to answer your question, like it is one of the systems that you can hook into, and it's a very good example where it's quite useful to everybody. But it's just one of many. Like there's a lot of things around scientists where you want to have tiny bit of information asked. And materials, I think, is always the number one case that makes sense to everybody.
Thanks.
I would agree to that because we do struggle with maintaining the inventory on a real-time basis because it is not just about what you have procured. It is also about who has consumed it at what time, and now what is left. And if that doesn't happen like on the go, the data that is generated out of any kind of digital inventory system that you are maintaining is useless because it is not going to help you in any ways. So yeah, I think if it is a voice based, I just have to go in and I said, okay, I have used this one bottle out of the 10. It records it. It gets deducted from the inventory and I get a real time data. So that's great. I think Jonas is trying to make me go out of the traditional lab and get into the new generation lab altogether.
I think we will dream to be in the lab of the future.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's coming one step at a time.
Yeah.
So Sheetal, whenever you're rolling out a new technology, how do you measure the success? I mean, this is a very big question always. How do you measure? How do you say this working? This is reaching the goal that I wanted it to reach when I deployed it?
Okay, so I think I did touch upon it in the start of the when you're changing a system, it's a big shift, especially when you're talking about an institution or an organization or a commercial setup. It's a big shift because it is not just 1 or 2 people who will have to adapting to it, or 1 or 2 processes who will need to adapt to it. There are a lot of interrelated things, interrelated works. Even within one lab, there are many analysts, and whether they will be able to use the new system well, how soon and how quickly they will get adapted to it, it's a big question mark. So I think the easier way to go about it is first understand what is your goal, what is the objective of introducing the digital system, and to achieve that goal, what are your milestones that are going to be. Once you understand the milestones, you just have to track it like a phase-wise manner. Supposingly now I say that, Jonas talked about inventory system. Maybe I would say include everything that is there. So the very first step when we talk about this is include everything that is there in a digital system. So that is my first step. And then you put in all the information that is related so that whatever retrieval that you are doing is like accurate. So like that, you just understand what are the different milestones to reach there. And yeah, if you're reaching the milestones, that means you're going there and achieving what you need at the end of it. So, but I also want to say that when we are talking about such a big makeshifts or changing the systems totally from manual to hybrid or hybrid to this, there are different. You do come across in on a real time. You do come across many challenges, and you have to always pivot or flex yourself and change the plan in between. So that's where the expertise or the technical expertise help. How quickly we do the shifts is going to decide the success of the entire shift. So I think if there is a good collaboration between the technicals, the domain, and the functional things, uh, I think even a failure sounds like a success because you are reaching one step. Yeah, so you're going one step ahead and not, you never go one step back. So it is always a forward journey. So yeah.
Yeah, I think you put the nail on it. Like the key thing is collaborating and working together to establish the goals and then measuring the success. Jonas, maybe you can explain a bit at LabTwin how we do measure the success, what our strategy is.
Yeah, I mean, we always have to find a measure that is kind of generic enough, so it kind of makes sense to everybody. And I think, Shita, what you said, it makes a lot of sense. Like every project is a little different. You have to set these milestones differently. Change management and cultural shift is a big part of it. When we think about KPIs or parameters, the easiest one that we normally can come up with that is super high level is time saved, which is basically a measure for efficiency. And I think when we do time saving, what is always good for everybody that actually works in the lab, it means every minute that you save is normally time saved of work that you would not enjoy, or most people that we talk to would not enjoy this kind of task that we can basically get rid of. It's a little bit like auto-completing in your emails where you say like, yeah, that makes sense. I wouldn't have to type this now. And you can basically just jump forward a little bit in terms of time. And on a typical value study these days, we can save about 96.3 minutes, I think is the average right now, per scientist per week. And when it then comes to the cost and effort of deployment, we are at an average of 5 times ROI, so return of investment. This is, of course, very high level. And normally for every deployment, we would have to look at what other goals, like what is maybe the first milestone that we want to reach, and then kind of see, okay, what is the goal of the organization? Because for us, it wouldn't also make sense to say like, this is what you now need to do, and this should be your KPIs. So we would always basically have to translate it into the goals that the organization has, but ROI and time saved is often a thing that in the end, whatever the individual goals are, the more precise ones, can be translated. These goals can be always translated to these two parameters that then also make sense to the organization that might be a little more detached from the actual departments introducing digital assistants like LabTwin.
Thanks. So I think we are reaching the end of this webinar, and I hope that our two panelists have answered all of your questions. If not, then feel free to reach out to us, and hopefully we can reply to your extra questions afterwards. Thank you, everyone. Back to you, Mark.
Thank you very much, Celia. Thank you very much to the panelists. So whilst I've not been visible on the recording, I have been listening, and it's been so incredibly interesting to hear all the insights that have been shared. And unfortunately, we are restricted to the 60 minutes, but I feel like the conversation could have just kept going and it would have just remained equally as insightful. So I'd just like to thank you all. Thank you very much for not just being here and recording the session, but the amount of preparation and effort that goes into these discussions. The recording will be made available and we'll drop it out to the registered attendees as well. Otherwise, thank you very much. Appreciate it.